Welcome to Systems Philosophy. We have been exploring together the concept of culture as a separate information storage field, stored in minds, in brains, and just like the memories that we gather over a lifetime that don't remember every detail of everything we have experienced, culture condenses those memories further to those that we have passed on and that get preserved over multiple lifetimes. So we can see the information gathering process of culture as a sort of distillation, a optimization that eventually distills down to the important essence of what we want preserved. Technology is the ability to manipulate things in the physical world, to take the branch of a tree and shape it into a spear or a bow or an arrow, to take a rock and utilize it to grind wheat, to break bones to get at the marrow, shape it into grindstones, into building stones. Technology is the manipulation of matter, of the real world, and the ability to create technology is stored in the memory field of culture and passed on from generation to generation. Technologies can be lost if a culture suffers a traumatic event, like a disaster or a war. Then the people who knew how to create things, how to do things, might themselves have died off before they passed on enough knowledge. Furthermore, if, and I've got the sun rising into my eyes, it's distracting me at the moment. I didn't pick my place quite as well as I thought here. But anyway, furthermore, if we have a certain technology that relies on other technologies, for instance, the technology of manipulating genetics relies on a whole lot of other technologies. We need microscopes, which needs the ability to have glass and build fine optics. We need the fine tools and the theoretical background that allows us to manipulate the genetics. So even if a few of the specialists survive, if society undergoes a disaster sufficient to take away the ability for those specialists to practice and pass their art on, the technology of gene editing might disappear from our culture. So culture and technology are two sides of the same coin, just like culture and the mind are two sides of the same coin. We can't separate them, and yet they have separate dynamics. Culture because it's greater than any individual mind. Technology because it manipulates the physical world and doesn't rely on biology. And by that I mean for a predator to become what it is, it doesn't just need to develop the right mind to hunt its prey, it also needs biological tools. Snakes use ambush and poison. Some do. Some use constriction. Other predators, like cheetahs, use raw speed. Others, like wolves, use the pack and to be able to run and sharp teeth. Things like lions also use a pride with raw strength, claws and teeth. The saber-toothed tiger presumably used its teeth as a certain way to pierce and immobilize its prey. These are all specific biological adaptations. The polar bear has fur that allows it to survive the Arctic. That's not needed in the tropics. So what technology allows us to do as humans is it allows us to not biologically adapt. We can technologically adapt. So instead of growing the same fur as the polar bear, we use the fur from reindeer and polar bears to create the same insulating effect in our clothing. We can bring in biological materials and inanimate objects into our repertoire instead of becoming a hunter with sharp teeth and claws. We can hunt from a distance using stones and spears. That way we never have to directly interact. We can use our brains, which have grown with the culture, to plan strategies for ambush and trapping and build complex strategies like snare traps, like fish traps, things that the biology hasn't adapted for. So physically we have become a generalist. We are still the naked ape, so to speak, which in a previous episode I speculated was initially an adaptation to allow the shedding of heat in hot climates as we injured and then ran down the injured prey, being able to shed heat in the midday African savanna faster than our prey could. That's only one theory. We also have the aquatic ape theory, the fact that our ancestors might have spent some time either in shallow inland waterways harvesting aquatic resources or by the seashore, which we know that our ancestors did, and the seashore is a very rich harvest ground. The intertidal zone is open to mollusks and hard-shelled creatures that can be cracked with a stone, just like bones to get marrow. And so it wouldn't take long for us to learn that if we can't get bones, we can get the soft insides of shells and mussels. We can then move into being able to harvest and swim. On top of our larynx being descended, our biology also has a unique ability to hold our breath. Now that might have been a natural adaptation already from speech. So did speech become before the breath holding, or did breath holding and breath control allow speech? It's an open question that we don't have any evidence for. We do know that we can hold our breath. In fact, babies naturally hold their breath if immersed in water. It's a reflex. That's amazing. Our heart slows down when we go underwater. We have a diving reflex. Our body optimizes oxygen consumption, which lets us hold our breath for quite long periods of time. And we have definitely had ancestors that were seafarers, be they coastal fishermen or sea voyagers, which I suspect they were. The Polynesians in particular showed, and what I believe to be a global seafaring nature. They didn't just stumble upon the Hawaiian Islands. They understood ocean navigation, but that's perhaps something for another day. So something that one person discovers or invents through culture can be preserved across the generations. We can see that already happening with chimpanzees that learned how to use rocks to crack nuts, thanks to language and the abstraction that language allows. Human culture is a far greater abstraction field, and we can not only abstract the complex steps it takes to build technology, thanks to the reflexive coupling between language and our brain development, but we can also pass those steps on, communicate them through demonstration and language, much like teachers still do today. Culture, therefore, is an enabler of technology, and technology is something that makes culture more valuable to humanity. We have become the cultural technological specialist and the biological generalist. That's not to say that we've become weak. We can't climb trees as well as a chimpanzee. We may not even have the raw strength of a gorilla, but we have tremendous endurance. We can shed heat and we can run longer than just about any animal, including the horse, in heat. And perhaps because we have such a long history of war, we can also sustain and heal from damage that most mammals couldn't dream of. So we still have our biological specializations, yet we are the cultural technological generalist. Technology, like culture, is a reflexive equilibrium that drifts. Reflexive in that using pounding stones interacted with our hands. We had to better be able to grip, to lift and lower our arms in order to use the pounding stones. Therefore, even our earliest hominid ancestors closest to the jungle dwellers that might have moved on to the plains and started harvesting bone marrow instead of jungle nuts, reflexively started to select individuals that were better at pounding and perhaps better at running away from predators to the nearest tree. So we had this reflexive coupling between the technological advantage of being able to access the food niche that bone marrow protected, that the pounding stone unlocked, like the inside of a nut. And that created other biological problems, like having to run away and climb trees to get away from the plains predators. Running from the plains predators would have created periods when the tribe couldn't get to the tree in time, and it's either fight or die. And that created circumstances where throwing rocks, poking with sticks, and throwing spears becomes a last-ditch Hail Mary survival effort. This reflexively feeds back into technology, and the stick becomes the walking stick, becomes the poking stick, becomes the throwing stick, becomes the spear with a stone head. And so technology drifts, and once you have invented a spear and invented the flint knife, the flint arrowhead, the flint spearhead, and you've learned how to put a sharp end on a stick by lashing a flint sharpened, and flint blades were as sharp as any knives are today. A properly made flint is sharp, but it's brittle, but it's an awesome weapon. Rather than a stick that simply poked holes, you now have a knife at the end of a stick that can slice and cut. And once you have that invention, then culture as a field retains the invention. We have the path of technology slowly innovating generation by generation through accident or design, until ultimately, like putting the steam engine and the cart together to make the car, one of our ancestors put the flint cutting edge onto the tip of a spear and created a cutting spear. And from there, the evolution of the spearhead was almost inevitable, because once you had the innovation, then we can produce incremental changes. So if we trace the path of technology, we see that it's very similar to biology. We get individual genes evolved through mutation, through trial and error and survival. We then get those genes combining in novel ways in new species. And if we look at the gene pool instead of the individual species, we can track that genes can jump from species, either hybridization or through infection by viruses. And technology can do the same through innovation. We can combine two branches and produce a hybrid that's more vigorous. Plants still do that all the time. Hybridization in plants is far more ubiquitous than in animals, because their body plans are more robust. They don't need to be as precisely executed. Therefore, hybridization and cross-species gene flows can be more extensive. Okay, I've explained a lot. What I'm trying to say as a theme for today's episode is to bring technology in as the manifest material part of the ephemeral, spiritual, non-material field that is knowledge. The software that through the hardware of our biology can take a rock and transmute it into a pounding stone, a millstone, a building stone, a flint spearhead, a flint knife. The knife existed in the rock. Entropy and natural probability means that occasionally maybe a landslide creates a flint, when just the right blow strikes just the right rock, and perhaps that was how humans discovered flint knives to start with, that it was some sort of human that cut themselves on a sharp edge, realized it could become a tool, and then figured out how to replicate the tool. Once replicated, though, the probability of flints appearing in the world changed. We're not just in the realm of physics and probability. Life alters the field of probability itself through the self-replicating von Neumann cell that built multicellular bodies and have, ever since evolution began, been evolving their own form and function to alter their own chances of survival against the background odds. Culture has allowed an information storage field so that lessons don't need to be just learnt by brains within a lifetime. They can be passed on, and that has all the value. The chances of discovering flint are very rare, but thanks to culture, once the discovery is made, it can not just be passed on, it can be spread. It becomes ubiquitous across all hominids, just like fire. it becomes a shared inheritance. Technology opens up huge physical capabilities that biological evolution can't access. Evolution can evolve claws and teeth, and even shark's teeth that get replaced and are incredibly well designed. Flint and fire and spears at the macro scale. Fire unlocks metallurgy, unlocks chemistry, unlocks predigestion of food through cooking, destruction of toxins in plants that make new food and energy sources available to us. It means we don't need to keep the gorilla gut for digestion of leaves. We can instead fire clay, create pots, and boil herbs and meat together to create soups and stews. Technology is humanity's superpower, but at its most basic point, which is why I trace this long path through systems dynamics into the emergence of basic technology and basic culture, is to show that humans are not so much different from our closest primate ancestor, that we share culture and technology. Yet those primates, for whatever reason, and perhaps because humans filled that niche first, we followed culture into and technology from the forest to the savannah, and whatever the accident, or perhaps from the forest to the water or the ocean's edge. I can't say for sure whether the aquatic ape or the sort of the plains scavenger theory is the most correct, but something changed, and the primate left the forest it was adapted to, took its basic technology and culture with it, and the history that our ancestors survived through, and the dynamic equilibrium and reflexive coupling allowed us to take that basic technology and expand upon it, improving our survival success and eventually becoming a specialist in technology and culture and a generalist in everything else. The same dynamics of equilibrium between forces that want to disrupt it and forces that maintain it, allowing a drift through time, apply to culture and technology. As I have said often in these series, when I draw distinctions between culture and technology, I'm making useful boundaries that the changing flux of reality has carved out in form and function. But in truth, reality is reality. Culture is never separate from the animals that carry it. Technology is perhaps separate as a material thing. The flint spearheads still survive, even though the culture has died. But it's just a rock in the landscape, shaped by the past, until a human with the ability to understand its form and function picks it up, binds it to a new long stick, and recreates the spear. Okay, I've covered a lot. I hope this was a more interesting episode. So I find that the methodical way that I've created my previous episodes has made them somewhat boring. I hope that you take the time to go through them because I have taken the time to build the concepts, although admittedly I'm new at this practice of taking my ideas and putting them down in video form, not through interactive discussion, but one-way communication. And I have also learnt on this journey in the same reflexive feedback dynamic that I've been using and that you led to the name of this channel, Systems Philosophy.